The U.S. horizon drifted slowly through the silent void of space. Lieutenant Daniel Wright stared out the viewport at the stars. His shift in the medical bay had ended an hour ago, but sleep wouldn't come. The memories of his last deployment still haunted him. The ship's alarm blared suddenly, jolting Daniel from his thoughts. All emergency response teams to stations. Unidentified vessel detected, announced Captain Lisa Ramirez over the intercom. Daniel rushed to the medical bay, his heart racing. He grabbed his emergency kit and headed to the shuttle bay where other crew members were gathering. "What's happening?" he asked Petty Officer Alex Miller. Scanner picked up a damaged ship just outside the neutral zone. "Looks like it took heavy fire. Captain thinks there might be survivors," Alex replied, checking his weapon. The boarding team of 6 loaded into the shuttle. Daniel was the only medic. As they approached the damaged vessel, Daniel saw the elegant design of the ship. It wasn't like anything in human records. "That's Zith Arian," said Commander Ben Foster, leading the team. "Royal markings. This could get complicated." Daniel had heard stories about the Zitharians. Tall, with shimmering blue skin and 4 arms, they ruled a vast empire at the edge of known space. Humans had only made contact with them 2 years ago, and relations remained tense. The shuttle docked with the damaged ship. The team entered cautiously, weapons ready. The air was thin but breathable. Bodies of blue-skinned aliens lay scattered across the floor, their copper-based blood creating pools of green. "Life signs ahead," Alex whispered, checking his scanner. They moved deeper into the ship. The damage was extensive. Daniel noticed blast patterns on the walls. "This wasn't an accident," he said quietly. "Looks like an inside job." The team reached what appeared to be the ship's main chamber. 4 Zitharian guards stood protectively around a fallen figure. When they saw the humans, they raised their weapons. "Stop right there," one of the guards shouted in broken English. Commander Foster raised his hand slowly. "We're here to help. We received your distress signal." "We sent no signal," the guard replied. "You did this." The situation was deteriorating fast. Daniel noticed the figure on the floor behind the guards. Even from a distance, he could see she was badly injured. Her clothing was more elaborate than the others, with symbols he recognized from briefings about the Zitharian royal family. "She needs medical attention," Daniel said, stepping forward slowly. "I'm a doctor. I can help." "Stay back, human," the guard warned. Daniel saw the injured Zitharian's chest rise and fall unevenly. Her blue skin had paled to a sickly gray. "She's going into shock," he said. "If I don't help her now, she'll die." The guards looked at each other uncertainly. The injured Zitharian let out a pained moan. "Please," Daniel said, "let me help her." After a tense moment, the lead guard nodded. "If she dies, so do you." Daniel rushed forward and knelt beside the injured alien. Up close, he could see the intricate patterns on her face marking her as royalty. Her 4 arms were arranged carefully around a wound in her abdomen that leaked green blood. "I'm Lieutenant Daniel Wright," he said softly as he began to examine her. "I'm going to help you." Her eyes fluttered open briefly, revealing silver irises. Betrayed, she whispered before losing consciousness again. Daniel opened his medkit and began to work. "I need to get her to our ship. We have better equipment there." The guards conferred briefly before the leader spoke. "I will accompany the princess. The others will remain with our dead." "Princess?" Commander Foster asked, surprised. "This is Princess Illyria of the 7th House, heir to the Zitharian throne," the guard replied gravely. "If she dies in your care, it will mean war." Daniel carefully lifted the princess onto a stretcher. Her life was in his hands now, and so was the peace between their species. As they carried her to the shuttle, he noticed something odd about her wound. It wasn't just a blast injury. The edges showed signs of poisoning. This was no random attack. Someone had wanted to make absolutely sure the princess didn't survive. Daniel's mind raced as the shuttle detached from the damaged royal vessel. Whatever had happened here was bigger than a simple assassination attempt, and now he was caught in the middle of it. The medical bay of the U.S. horizon buzzed with urgent activity. Daniel worked quickly, setting up monitoring equipment around Princess Illyria. Her blue skin had grown even paler during the short journey from her ship. "What do we know about Zitharian physiology?" Daniel asked Dr. Samantha Collins, the ship's chief medical officer. "Not much," Samantha admitted, scanning the princess with a medical device. "They have 3 hearts, copper-based blood, and a complex nervous system. Most of our medical records are theoretical. They've never allowed human doctors to treat them before." The Zitharian guard stood stiffly in the corner, watching their every move with 4 arms crossed over his chest. His silver eyes never blinked. The medical scanner beeped loudly. "Her middle heart is failing," Daniel said. "And there's something strange in her bloodstream." Daniel took a sample of the green blood and placed it in the analyzer. The results appeared on the screen moments later. "It's poison," he said. "I've never seen anything like it. It's attacking her organs one by one." "Can you cure her?" the guard demanded. Daniel looked up. "I need more information about Zitharian biology and about this poison." The guard hesitated, then tapped a device on his wrist. A holographic screen appeared. "This connects to our Royal Medical Database. Our physician can assist." A blue face appeared on the screen. The royal physician looked shocked to see humans, but quickly composed himself when he saw the princess. "She's been poisoned," Daniel explained. "I need your help to save her." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. The Zitharian physician provided information about their biology, while Daniel and Samantha worked to create an antidote. The poison was complex, designed specifically for Zitharian royalty. "Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing," Daniel muttered as he prepared another injection. Princess Illyria's condition worsened. Her breathing became shallow, and her 3rd heart began to fail. "We're losing her," Samantha said. Daniel refused to give up. He recalled a technique he had used once during the colony wars, when supplies were low and he had to improvise. "I need to cool her body temperature," he said. "It might slow the poison long enough for the antidote to work." The Zitharian physician objected. "Our people cannot tolerate cold." "It's either that or watch her die," Daniel replied firmly. After a tense moment, the physician nodded. Daniel and Samantha worked together to lower the princess's temperature gradually. Ice packs were placed at key points on her body. Her skin turned from pale blue to almost white, but her vital signs stabilized. "Now we wait," Daniel said, injecting the antidote into her central circulatory system. Hours passed. Daniel refused to leave the princess's side, even when Samantha offered to take over. The Zitharian guard watched him with growing curiosity. "You care much for someone you do not know," the guard observed. Daniel shrugged. "It's my job. Every life matters." The guard seemed puzzled by this, even an alien princess. "Especially an alien princess who might be the key to peace between our species," Daniel replied. Near dawn, ship time, Princess Illyria's vital signs began to improve. Her middle heart stabilized, and her body temperature rose naturally as they removed the cooling packs. The guard received a message on his communicator. His expression darkened. "What is it?" Daniel asked. "The royal fleet has been notified of the attack. They are sending ships to retrieve the princess. They believe humans may be responsible." Captain Ramirez entered the medical bay. "We've been hailed by 3 Zitharian warships. They're demanding we hand over the princess." Daniel looked down at his patient. Her eyes remained closed, but her breathing was stronger. "She's not stable enough to move yet," he said. "And she's the only one who knows what really happened." "Then you better wake her up, Lieutenant," Captain Ramirez said grimly. "Because we have 6 hours before those ships arrive, and they're not coming to talk." Daniel nodded. The real challenge was just beginning. He had saved the princess from the poison, but now he needed her to save them all from a war. Princess Illyria opened her silver eyes slowly. The bright lights of the medical bay made her wince. She tried to sit up but felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Easy now," Daniel said. "You're still recovering." The princess blinked, focusing on the human face above her. Her four hands instinctively moved to push him away. "Do not touch me," she said, her voice weak but commanding. "It is forbidden for commoners to touch royal blood." Daniel stepped back, hands raised. "Sorry, Your Highness. I'm Lieutenant Daniel Wright, medical officer of the U.S. Horizon. You were poisoned. We managed to create an antidote." The Zitharian guard stepped forward. "He saved your life, Princess." Illyria looked confused. She glanced around the medical bay, taking in the human technology and the absence of her royal attendants. "Where are my people? Why am I on a human vessel?" she demanded. "Your ship was attacked," Daniel explained. "Most of your crew didn't survive. We responded to the damage and found you." Captain Ramirez entered the medical bay and bowed slightly. "Princess Illyria, I'm Captain Lisa Ramirez. I understand this is confusing, but we need your help. 3 Zitharian warships are on their way here. They believe we had something to do with the attack on your vessel." The princess's eyes widened. "That is absurd." It was. She stopped suddenly, looking uncertain. "You said you were betrayed," Daniel reminded her. "Before you lost consciousness on your ship." Illyria studied him closely. "You remember my words?" "Every one of them," Daniel said. "Your life was my responsibility." Something in his tone made the princess pause. In her culture, no one spoke to royalty with such directness. "The poison was designed specifically for Zitharian royalty," Daniel continued. "Someone from your world wanted you dead." The princess's face hardened. "My brother, Prince Zorith. He never wanted peace with humans. He believes your kind are beneath us." Captain Ramirez frowned. "We need to contact your father, the Emperor. Explain what happened before those warships arrive." "My father is away on the outer colonies," Illyria said. "Zorith would be acting as regent in his absence. Any communication would go through him." "Then we're in trouble," Daniel said. The princess tried to stand again, stronger this time. Daniel resisted the urge to help her, remembering the taboo against touching royalty. "I must speak to the fleet commander myself," she said. "Only my royal seal will convince them." She took a step and stumbled. Daniel moved quickly, catching her before she fell. Their eyes met for a moment of surprise. "Forgive me, Your Highness," he said, helping her back to the bed. "But you're not strong enough yet." Instead of anger, curiosity flashed across her face. "You care nothing for our customs, human." "I care about my patient's health," Daniel replied. "Royal or not." The princess was silent for a moment. "In my culture, medics are servants of low status. Yet you speak as if your role gives you authority." Daniel smiled slightly. "On Earth, doctors take an oath to preserve life. All life is equally valuable." "A strange concept," she murmured. Captain Ramirez cleared her throat. "Princess, we have 4 hours before those ships arrive. Can you record a message they'll believe?" Illyria nodded slowly. "Bring me a communication device. I will speak to them." As Captain Ramirez left to prepare the communication, Daniel checked the princess's vital signs. "Why did you save me?" Illyria asked suddenly. "Our empires are barely at peace. Many humans would benefit from more." "That's not how we think," Daniel said. "At least, not all of us." "You are a puzzle, Lieutenant Wright," she said. "In my court, everyone has motives. Everyone wants something." Daniel met her gaze. "I just want you to get better, Your Highness, and maybe help prevent a war while you're at it." For the first time, a hint of a smile touched the princess's face. "Perhaps there is more to humans than I was taught." Daniel smiled back. "There's more to everyone, if you take the time to look." Princess Illyria's message temporarily calmed the approaching Zitharian warships. They agreed to meet at a neutral starbase to transfer the princess safely. Captain Ramirez set course for Starbase 47, 2 days away at maximum speed. Daniel continued to monitor the princess's recovery in the medical bay. Her 3 hearts were now beating in normal rhythm, and the poison had nearly cleared from her system. "You're making remarkable progress," Daniel said, checking her vital signs. "Zitharians must heal faster than humans." "Our bodies are designed for efficiency," Illyria replied. She sat up straight, royal posture evident even in a medical gown. "Lieutenant Wright, I wish to walk around your ship. I grow tired of these walls." Daniel hesitated. "I should check with the captain first. Are all your people so bound by rules?" she asked with a hint of amusement. "Only the smart ones," Daniel replied with a small smile. After getting permission from Captain Ramirez, Daniel escorted Princess Illyria through the ship. Crew members stared as the blue-skinned royal passed by, her 4 arms clasped behind her back in formal Zitharian style. "Your ship is small," she observed. "Our royal vessels are 10 times this size." "We prefer to think of it as efficient," Daniel said, echoing her earlier words. For the first time, he heard something like a laugh from the princess. They reached the observation deck, a small room with a wide viewport showing the stars streaking by at warp speed. Illyria stood silently, watching the view. "It looks different from your world?" Daniel asked. "Not the stars," she said softly, "but how we see them." She turned to face him. "My people believe the stars are the souls of past emperors, watching over us. What do humans believe?" Before Daniel could answer, the ship shuddered violently. Red alert sirens wailed through the corridors. "Battle stations, we are under attack," Captain Ramirez's voice announced over the intercom. Daniel grabbed a nearby communication panel. "Medical bay, this is Lieutenant Wright. What's happening?" "Stealth ships," came the reply through static. 3 of them. They came out of nowhere. Another blast rocked the ship. Lights flickered and went out, replaced by dim emergency lighting. "We need to get you somewhere safe," Daniel told the princess. They hurried through the corridors as crew members rushed to their stations. Another hit sent them both crashing into a wall. The ship groaned under the strain. "Engineering reports hull breach on Deck 5. Someone shouted over the intercom. "That's where the medical bay is," Daniel realized with alarm. A massive explosion shook the ship. Daniel was thrown forward, shielding the princess as debris rained down around them. When he looked up, the corridor ahead was blocked by fallen beams and twisted metal. "We're cut off," he said, helping Illyria to her feet. "Are you hurt?" "I am unharmed," she said, though Daniel noticed she was favoring one of her 4 arms. The ship's computer voice came over the remaining speakers. "Warning, life support failing on decks 4 through 6. All personnel evacuate to emergency stations." "That's us," Daniel said grimly. "We need to reach the escape pods on Deck 3. They found a maintenance ladder and began to climb. Daniel went first, then reached down to help the princess. She hesitated only briefly before accepting his hand. As they reached Deck 3, they heard weapons fire. Daniel peered around the corner to see 3 armed figures in stealth suits. They weren't human or Zitharian. "Mercenaries," Illyria whispered. "Hired by my brother, no doubt." Daniel reached for his medical bag and pulled out a sedative. "Stay here," he told the princess. "What are you doing?" she asked. "You are a medic, not a soldier." "Sometimes you have to be both," he replied. Daniel moved silently down the corridor, using techniques he'd learned during his combat medic training. The mercenaries were focused on breaking into a secured room, not watching behind them. He managed to inject one with the sedative before the others noticed. A fight broke out. Daniel, though skilled, was outnumbered. A blast from an energy weapon grazed his shoulder, burning through his uniform. Just as the second mercenary aimed at his chest, a blue blur of motion knocked the weapon aside. Princess Illyria, using all 4 arms with surprising strength, disabled the mercenary with precise strikes. The third attacker raised his weapon, but Daniel tackled him to the ground. Together, they subdued all 3. "I thought I told you to stay hidden," Daniel said, breathing hard. And I never said I would obey, Illyria replied calmly, though her silver eyes showed concern as she looked at his injury. You are wounded. It's not serious, Daniel said, though the burn on his shoulder throbbed with pain. He reached for his medical bag, but another explosion rocked the ship. We must reach the escape pods, Illyria insisted. Your wound can wait. They hurried through the smoke-filled corridors. Emergency lights flashed, casting eerie shadows. The ship shuddered continuously as it took more hits. Warning: hull integrity at 30%, announced the computer. All personnel evacuate immediately. When they reached the escape pod bay, they found most of the pods already gone. Only one remained. Get in, Daniel told the princess, opening the pod's hatch. Illyria stepped inside, then turned to look at him with concern. There are more mercenaries coming. I can hear them. Daniel glanced back down the corridor. Footsteps approached rapidly. Then we need to leave now. As they prepared to launch, the ship lurched violently. Daniel lost his balance and fell hard against the control panel. Pain shot through his injured shoulder, and fresh blood soaked his uniform. Illyria helped him into the pod and sealed the hatch. Her 4 hands moved quickly over the controls, launching the pod away from the dying ship. Through the small window, they watched the U.S. horizon take another direct hit. Explosions bloomed silently across its hull. Your people, Illyria said softly. Will they survive? Captain Ramirez is good at her job, Daniel replied, hoping it was true. The other escape pods should make it. The pod's engines fired, carrying them away from the battle. Daniel tried to check their course, but the navigation system had been damaged. We're heading toward that moon, Illyria observed, pointing to a small gray orb growing larger in their viewport. Daniel attempted to adjust their course, but the controls were unresponsive. We can't change direction. Brace for landing. The pod entered the moon's thin atmosphere, shaking violently. Illyria grabbed Daniel with 2 of her arms, steadying him as they plummeted toward the surface. The impact was jarring. Daniel's head struck the bulkhead, and darkness swept over him. When he opened his eyes, his first thought was that he'd gone blind. Then he realized he was looking at a night sky filled with unfamiliar stars. He was lying on the ground outside the escape pod. You are awake, said Illyria's voice nearby. Good. Daniel tried to sit up but fell back with a groan. His shoulder felt like it was on fire, and his head pounded. Do not move, the princess commanded. She knelt beside him, her blue skin almost glowing in the starlight. You have lost blood. How did I get out here? He asked weakly. I carried you, she said simply. The pod was leaking fuel. It was not safe. Daniel looked at her with surprise. You carried me. You forget I have 4 arms, she replied with a hint of pride. And my people are stronger than humans. She had made a small camp beside a rocky outcropping. A fire burned nearby, providing warmth against the moon's cold night. You built a fire? Daniel asked, impressed. I observed your survival training videos in your ship's database during my recovery, she explained. They were educational. Daniel smiled despite his pain. Full of surprises, aren't you, Your Highness? Illyria's expression grew serious. Your wound needs attention. Tell me what to do. She helped him sit up against a rock. Daniel opened his medical bag, which she had thoughtfully brought from the pod. First, we need to clean the wound, he instructed. With surprising gentleness, Illyria followed his directions. Her 4 hands worked in perfect coordination, cleaning the burn, applying medication, and bandaging his shoulder. You'd make a good medic, Daniel said as she finished. In my culture, royalty does not perform such tasks, she replied. Then she added more quietly. But I find it satisfying to help. Daniel looked around at the barren landscape. Any sign of rescue? Illyria shook her head. The pod's beacon is damaged. I have activated my royal signal, but in this system, she didn't need to finish. They both knew it might be days before anyone found them. We should conserve supplies, Daniel said. This moon doesn't look like it has much to offer. I will take first watch, Illyria insisted. You need rest to heal. As Daniel drifted towards sleep, he realized something had changed. The princess who had once refused to be touched by a commoner was now tending his wounds with her own hands. Thank you, he murmured, for saving my life. In the firelight, he thought he saw a new expression on her alien face, something like compassion. We are even now, Lieutenant Wright, she said softly. 3 days passed on the cold moon. Daniel's wound improved slowly. Each morning, Illyria changed his bandages with careful hands. Each night, they took turns keeping watch beside the small fire. On the 4th day, Daniel felt strong enough to explore the area around their camp. Illyria walked beside him, ready to help if his strength failed. Tell me about your world, Daniel said as they climbed a small ridge. Illyria's silver eyes looked distant. The royal palace has 1,000 rooms. The ceilings are so high that birds fly inside. I have lived there all my life. Sounds lonely, Daniel commented. She looked at him with surprise. How did you know? Daniel shrugged his good shoulder. Just a guess. Big places often feel that way. Yes, she admitted. It is lonely. I am surrounded by servants and guards, but few speak to me as you do. When they reached the top of the ridge, they saw something moving in the valley below. Daniel pulled out his binoculars from the survival kit. It's a search party, he said with excitement. And they're wearing Starfleet uniforms. Relief washed over them both. Within an hour, they were surrounded by rescue teams from both the human fleet and a Zitharian royal vessel that had arrived in the system. Commander Kelthus, head of the Royal Guard, bowed deeply to Princess Illyria. Your Highness, we feared the worst. The Emperor will be overjoyed. Lieutenant Wright, Captain Ramirez said, approaching with a smile. Glad to see you alive. Most of our crew made it out on the escape pods. As medical teams checked them both, Daniel noticed Illyria growing quiet and formal again, returning to her royal demeanor. On the Zitharian ship, they were given separate quarters. Daniel's shoulder was properly treated, though the Zitharian doctors seemed surprised by how well Illyria had cared for him. That evening, Captain Ramirez met with Daniel privately. We have proof that Prince Zorith was behind the attack, she said. The mercenaries we captured confessed. They were hired to make it look like humans assassinated the princess. He wanted to start a war, Daniel said. And he almost succeeded, Ramirez replied. We're heading to the Zitharian homeworld. The Emperor has requested your presence at the royal court. The next day, Daniel found himself in new formal uniform, standing beside Captain Ramirez in the grand throne room of the Zitharian palace. The ceiling was indeed high enough for birds to fly inside, just as Illyria had described. The Emperor, tall and imposing with elaborate markings on his blue skin, sat on a crystal throne. Prince Zorith stood nearby, his face a mask of controlled anger. Princess Illyria entered, wearing royal robes of shimmering fabric. She looked completely different from the person who had tended Daniel's wound on the moon. She seemed distant, untouchable. The Emperor spoke in a deep voice. My daughter has told me everything. Lieutenant Daniel Wright, you saved the heir to our throne. The Zitharian Empire is in your debt. Prince Zorith stepped forward. Father, we cannot trust these humans. Silence, the Emperor commanded. Your sister has shown me evidence of your treachery. You will face justice for your crimes. Guards surrounded the prince, who glared at Daniel with hatred. The Emperor continued. In light of these events, I propose a new era of cooperation between our peoples. Captain Ramirez bowed. The United Earth government would welcome such cooperation, Your Majesty. After the formal ceremony, Daniel prepared to return to his ship. He hadn't spoken directly with Illyria since their rescue. She had returned to her royal role, and he to his duties. As he packed his things, there was a knock at his door. He opened it to find Princess Illyria standing there, without her usual entourage of guards. Lieutenant Wright, she said formally. Then her voice softened. Daniel, I wanted to speak with you before you leave. Daniel smiled. I was wondering if I'd get to say goodbye. Not goodbye, she said. I have made a decision that may surprise you. Her silver eyes held a determination he had come to recognize during their time on the moon. I'm listening, Your Highness, he said. I wish to learn human medicine, Princess Illyria announced. Her silver eyes watched Daniel closely for his reaction. Daniel blinked in surprise. That's unexpected. Why? On the moon, when I helped heal you, I felt something I never experienced before, she explained. Purpose. Not the purpose that comes with royal duty, but something I chose myself. A week later, a grand ceremony was held in the royal palace's Great Hall. Representatives from Earth and the Zitharian Empire gathered to sign new peace agreements. Daniel stood with the human delegation, wearing his dress uniform. Captain Ramirez leaned closer to him. Did you know about this? She whispered. Daniel shook his head. He had been told only that Princess Illyria would make an important announcement. The Emperor stood from his crystal throne. Today marks a new chapter between our worlds, he declared. And my daughter, Princess Illyria, wishes to speak. Illyria stepped forward, her royal robes shimmering in the light. The hall fell silent. My experience with Lieutenant Daniel Wright has shown me that we have much to learn from humans, she began. Today, I announced the creation of the Interspecies Medical Exchange Program. Zitharian and human doctors will train together, sharing knowledge that can save lives on both our worlds. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Such cooperation was unprecedented. Furthermore, Illyria continued, I will be the first Zitharian to study human medical techniques. Gasps echoed through the hall. A royal princess, performing the work of a common physician. It was unheard of. Illyria looked directly at Daniel. Lieutenant Wright has agreed to serve as the program's first advisor, if his government permits. This was news to Daniel. He glanced at Captain Ramirez, who nodded with a smile. After the ceremony, Daniel approached Princess Illyria in the palace gardens. She stood alone by a fountain, watching strange, colorful fish swim in the water. Your announcement caused quite a stir, Daniel said. Change often does, she replied. Then she turned to face him fully. Will you accept the position? I'd be honored, he said. But I have to ask, why me? Because you taught me that true nobility comes not from birth, but from how we treat others, she said simply. Daniel smiled. That's a lesson worth sharing. There is something else, Illyria said, her voice softening. In my culture, we rarely show emotion. It is considered a weakness, especially for royalty. Daniel nodded. He had noticed how controlled the Zitharians were. But there is one exception, she continued. Our tears. Unlike humans, Zitharians cry only in moments of profound transformation, when our understanding of the world fundamentally changes. She stepped closer to Daniel, and to his surprise, silver tears began to form in her eyes. These are not tears of sadness, she explained, letting them fall freely down her blue cheeks. They are tears of change. You have changed how I see your people, how I see my own role, and how I understand the universe. Daniel was speechless. The tears looked like liquid silver in the light. In our history, no royal has ever cried in public, she said. Tomorrow, at the final ceremony, I will. I want my people to see that change is not something to fear. The next day, before thousands of witnesses from both worlds, Princess Illyria repeated her commitment to the medical exchange program. As she spoke of her experiences with Daniel, silver tears flowed down her face. The Zitharian crowd watched in stunned silence. Then, slowly, they began to understand the significance of what they were seeing. When the ceremony ended, Daniel approached the princess. You've started something important today, he said. We have started it together, she replied. She held out all four of her hands to him, a gesture of profound respect in Zitharian culture. Daniel took her hands in his. To new beginnings, he said. And to tears of change, Princess Illyria added, her silver eyes bright with possibility. Behind them, human and Cytherian delegates began to mingle, talking and sharing ideas. It was just the beginning of what would become a lasting peace between their worlds. All because a human medic had once saved an alien princess, and in doing so, changed both their lives forever.